My name is Robert, and I'm stupid. Stupid enough to let my 8-year-old software run my heart to this day. And 80% of you do the same thing. Let's talk about the survival skill that kept you safe, but is now writing your obituary one breath at a time. When you first saw this title, you held your breath, didn't you? Did it literally happen, or does it happen to you? Your diaphragm stopped moving for somewhere between 2 and 8 seconds before you clicked. You do it every time you open an email, every Slack notification, every meeting that goes quiet when you're about to speak, every time your phone lights up and you don't know if it's good news or that other kind. It's called screen apnea. Yes, there's a word for it. And a researcher named Linda Stone, former Apple, former Microsoft, she watched 200 people at work for 7 months and found it in 80% of them. 80%. So in other words, 4 out of 5 professionals sitting at their desks doing their jobs are quietly suffocating, and not one of them even knows about it. The other 20%, they aren't necessarily calmer people, not less stressed people. Some of them are trained performers, dancers, athletes, military, people who specifically deliberately learned something about breathing under pressure that nobody taught the rest of us. And a lot of them are just kind of lucky. But you are not that 20%. Not yet. Here's the question nobody asks after Linda Stone's research. Not what's the technique, not how do I stop. The question is why? Why is this happening? Why does an email make your body respond like something dangerous is happening? The answer is old, older than email, older than your career, older than you think. 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, and it's running right now. Here's what most breath work gets wrong. When you imagine a breathing problem, you picture anxiety, hyperventilation, someone in a parking lot breathing too fast, too shallow. They reach for the paper bag, and the solution is just so obvious. Just slow down, count to 4, breathe through the nose, and that works for one type of breathing problem, but not yours. Your stress response has 2 branches. Fight or flight makes you hyperventilate. Fast, shallow, upper chest. Your body flooding itself with oxygen to prepare for physical action. You can feel that one. The racing heart, the sweat, the adrenaline that arrives whether you want it or not. Freeze does the exact opposite. Freeze makes you stop breathing. Dramatically slowed breath, near apnea. Heart rate drops 46%. Breathing slows to 30%, maybe 50%. 2 completely opposite psychological responses, requiring completely opposite treatments. If your pattern is to freeze, if you hold your breath instead of hyperventilating, then every slowdown and breathe technique tells your nervous system that the threat got worse. You've been medicating the wrong thing. And if you grew up in a house where stillness was safety, where quiet meant you weren't noticed, where loud meant danger was coming and small meant you survived it, the pattern is freeze. In 2024, researchers published a paper on something called amygdala involvement in respiratory dysfunction. I know, quite a handful. I actually read this at 11 p.m. I put my phone down, and then I picked it up again, and I read it again because it hit so hard. They wanted to understand in this research exactly how your amygdala, the threat detection of your brain, connects to your breathing. So they did something fairly extreme. During epilepsy surgery, with patients awake on the operating table, they passed mild electrical current through their amygdala. 100% of the subjects stopped breathing. Not slower, not shallower, stopped. And here's what I couldn't stop reading. These patients were awake, having conversations. They were stopping breathing in the middle of a sentence and finishing them, not gasping, not distressed, talking. Their amygdala had just issued a complete shutdown of their respiratory system without asking a single question. The researchers asked them afterward if they'd noticed anything unusual, and none of them had. Not one. The amygdala has a direct neural highway to the brainstem, straight past to the pre-Boetzinger complex, the actual rhythm generator for breathing that bypasses conscious awareness entirely. It can shut off your breathing without your permission, without your knowledge, without leaving a trace. So every time you forget to breathe in a high-stakes meeting, every time your voice tightens before you speak, every time you open an email and feel that slight catch in your chest, that's not a quirk. That's not anxiety. That's a signal from the threat detection system that learned something decades ago and has been running the same response ever since. The meeting didn't send that signal. The email didn't. Your boss didn't. Something from 20, 30, 40 years ago did. In the early 1900s, researchers at the CDC partnered with Kaiser Permanente. They studied 17,337 adults, very specific number. And they asked about childhood trauma, abuse, neglect, household chaos. They scored it, and they tracked health outcomes for decades after. They called it the ACE study. Think about that child in a house where raised voices meant something bad was coming, who learned early to read the room from the top of the stairs, who made themselves invisible, who breathed quietly and waited, not because they were told to, because their nervous system was extraordinary at solving the problem in front of it. That child is now an adult. Most adults still don't know that they're suffering from adverse childhood experience and increasing the risk of COPD, cardiac onset pulmonary disease, by 44%, asthma by 32%, 48% higher likelihood of chronic respiratory disease. Not from smoking, they controlled for that in the ACE tests where these studies were done. These were childhood experiences producing adult lung disease decades later in people that had no idea the damage never stopped compounding. The mechanism, the body's stress system never fully turned off. Lung growth slowed down in childhood. Lung function started declining faster in young adulthood. Inflammation stayed elevated. The body kept score long after the child stopped keeping it consciously. Your body didn't break, it adapted. It ran the most brilliant program it had access to at 8 years old. And I call it Legacy OS. Stay small, don't draw attention, survive. It's not a character flaw, not a trauma response in the clinical sense that makes people shut down. It's this outdated software. It was extraordinary software at the time that possibly solved what could have been an impossible problem. The problem isn't the software now. The problem is it never got the update notification that your situation has changed. And it's been running in your desk, in your boardroom, in your body for decades. And this armor was so good, so effective, so completely invisible, even to me, that we genuinely believed it's part of our personality for most of our entire adult lives. But here is what the armor costs. Chronic breath holding, not once, not occasionally, but 20, 40, 60 times a day, the way you do at your desk, triggers something researchers call cardiac remodeling. Your heart doesn't absorb that. It changes the shape to survive it. The specific change is called left ventricular hypertrophy. Your left ventricle, the chamber that pumps blood into your entire body, begins to thicken, not with muscle, unfortunately, but with fibrous tissue, scar tissue, Research shows people with severe sleep apnea have 14 times the odds of this happening. And here's what research is now finding about sleep apnea. The breath holding you do at your desk and sleep apnea may be two expressions of the same underlying dysfunction. When you practice holding your breath for 8 hours a day at work, you may be training your respiratory centers for what happens when you close your eyes at night. Your heart doesn't argue with your inbox. It just adjusts. Every email, every held breath, every notification that fires to the amygdala and shuts down the diaphragm for 3 seconds while your heartbeat absorbs the impact all by itself. There's something called the cardiac ledger. It's not a metaphor, not a framework I invented to make a point. It's an actual biological record written in the tissue of the organ that has to beat 100,000 times every day, regardless if you dealt with any of your issues or not. And it's been open like that since you were a kid. So if you've become aware that you suffer from email apnea, holding your breath before you read an email, before a meeting, before something important, even a text, here's the reversal data. It's not a metaphor, it's the numbers. This is all based on an 8-week study, slow-loaded breathing training, home-based, daily, consistent. You have to stick to this, guys. Systolic blood pressure from all of the people involved in this test went down 22 points. Diastolic, down 9%. The resting heart rate went down 12 beats per minute. No medication, no procedure, no hospital, no waiting room. These should all be magical things to hear. 22 points off systolic is the difference between managed hypertension and a stroke risk that follows you at home every night. And the pharmaceutical companies aren't going to like this next test. In 2023, Stanford published a randomized controlled trial in Cell Reports Medicine. They tested the cyclic sighing against medication. So controlled sighing against taking a pill, against even box breathing, against hyperventilation techniques. Cyclic sighing won, not by 5%, not by a small percent, by 57%. The technique almost is insultingly simple, which is probably why it's not so popular. It's hard to make money from. 2 quick inhales through the nose. The first one fills your lungs. The second one tops them off. And then 1 long, complete exhale through the mouth until there's nothing left. It's kind of like this. Almost all of it in, and then a little bit more. Exhale through the mouth. Wow. That actually felt good. I'm always impressed by that. It makes a difference. Your body actually does this automatically when you cry. When you gasp with sudden relief, Stanford proved that you can do it on command. When you cry and at the end, right? And you feel better after a good cry, this is part of why. It's more than just the emotional relief. It's the breathing relief. In 5 seconds before you unmute between agenda items, right now if you want, try this. A deep breath in through the nose, hold it until you think you can't do anymore, and then a little bit more, and let it out slowly. Try it. Pause. Try. Now, do you have a more advanced case of email apnea? Let's jump to level 2. This next one I actually hated for the first 3 weeks that I tried it, mostly because it felt a little bit ridiculous and a little bit more time consuming as opposed to having one big, long, extended breath. But I'm telling you that directly because I wish someone would have told me what a huge difference that this makes. And the key here is pure simplicity. 6 breaths per minute. Inhale 5 seconds. Exhale 5 seconds. 20 minutes a day. That's your resonance frequency, the breathing rate at which your heart, your lungs, and your brains lock into coherence. Where heart rate variability, the most reliable marker of stress resilience, lost its maximum. Where the legacy OS starts accepting the update. I felt like I was performing breathing, like I was doing it wrong, like surely this was really way too simple to make a huge difference. And it did take more time. But I'll be honest, it felt really good. I think it feels better than meditation. I think you can even do it while meditating. That's probably my next level. And between these two techniques, one of them is kind of an emergency breath, hold it and let it out. And then this more intentional 20-minute routine. I've been doing this for 4 months now. I still do it. And it has made such a huge difference for my stress level and productivity and brain fog. Now, out of the 3 techniques that we're going over here, this is the final one. Polyvagal theory, the science of how your nervous system decides whether a room is safe, says freeze patterns don't fully rewire with this technique alone. They require co-regulation, an actual nervous system that has already decided it's safe, and actual physical proximity, teaching yours by example. Not a podcast about safety, not a productivity system with safety built into the workflow, not an app, people, physical presence, a room where your nervous system can exhale because someone else already has. This is why isolation feeds the freeze, and why the most strategically stupid move some of us can make in a culture that tells you to optimize alone, perform alone, recover alone, is to find a room where we can breathe at a normal human rate. One of the very best ways to do this is to spend time with a pet. Pets naturally regulate your breathing and make you feel calm. Being around supportive friends and people who make you feel comfortable also naturally help you to regulate. The best way to possibly regulate is to be around a regulated person. The mirror receptor cells within your body are going to look to them and naturally synchronize. This is the hardest step, and I think this is the nuclear option because so many of us want to solve our problems alone, because the same problems that cause apnea tend to be related to us being afraid to ask for help or to ask questions. Strategic stupidity is also admitting that willpower cannot rewrite what childhood encoded, and being stupid enough to ask the room anyway. That stimulus, that bully, that dominating teacher, that family member, whatever it is, that required you to be quieter than you were when you were just little, smaller, less present than you are now, less knowledgeable and less big, you can let it go. Your body being extraordinary, it built a solution. It held the breath so your predator wouldn't find you. It slowed your heart so that you could disappear. And it ran that program until running it was no longer a choice. It was just how you move through rooms. That's not damage. That's the most sophisticated survival software architecture that there is. It got you to where you are today. But the cardiac ledger is real. It's time to update that software. You now have 3 techniques. Whether you use them or not is up to you, because this is real. The scar tissue is real. The 30 years of blood pressure compounding quietly in the background of your career is real. And that 22-point drop of blood pressure in 8 weeks is also very, very real. And so is the fact that your diaphragm, that muscle that's been holding a position for 8 years, needed to survive. It's not broken, it's waiting. It's been waiting for you this whole time just to decide that the war is over. You survived it. You are safe enough now to breathe like someone who knows that. You built armor for a war that ended. This is not failure of spirit. This is failure to update the inventory. The armor saved your life. Now it is preventing the life it saved. It's a tragedy of the successful soldier. They win, but they cannot remove the breastplate. You are that soldier. The battle is over. Take it off. My name is Robert, and I'm stupid. Stupid enough to have put my phone down at 11 o'clock and read the same research paper again so that I could share it with you, because it's something that changed my life, and I want it to change yours. Try this. It will work. It's worked for me. It can work for you too. Own your stupid. Rewrite your story. If you want to be part of this movement, like, subscribe. Let me know in the comments below that you're here. Let me know if you're someone that was not aware that you had email apnea. And if you'd like to get our weekly newsletter, it's free. Sign up with the link below. I'll see you on the next one.